SEAL Team 1 in Vietnam, as well as the rigorous training standards required to be selected as a Navy SEAL, and how that training was applied in Vietnam in Mr. Weaver's subsequent career. Without further ado, it is my esteemed pleasure to introduce Mr. Thomas D. Weaver.
This was 1965 to 1970. I was on active duty. The jacket still fits, the hat still fits. This is about the third pair of pants though, so the waist didn't stay up with me. So you saw me in my cover in the military. It's a cover, it's not a hat. So we'll take that off so I can be comfortable. I'm going to start for 15 or 20 minutes, and anyone who has any questions, clarifications while I'm doing this, let me know and we'll get through that right away. So I am at your convenience for the day, so I wanted to let everyone know I went through high school, went through college in Western Pennsylvania. I can give you the name of the school, and since I told you it was in Western Pennsylvania, that's where I went to school, but I can give you the name of the school, and none of you would probably be able to spell it. It's Teal College. Anybody know how to spell Teal? T-E-A-L. Close? Not? That's the duck. The teal duck. T-H-I-E-L. Teal College. It's about 100 miles north of Pittsburgh. I grew up in Pittsburgh and went to high school. Wouldn't say I was a good student, but I made it through, made it to college. Came out of college in 1964. That's where we're going to start this story, 1964. 1964, I graduated with a degree in psychology. Comes time for graduation, and I'm thinking, what am I going to do with psychology? But that was the only thing I had enough good grades in to graduate, so I graduated with a psych degree. So at that time, and a lot of you look like you were from that vintage, we had the draft at that time. There is no draft now, but at that time, most everybody had a ping pong ball. The U.S. government every year would say, your birthday is on X date, March the 8th. Tomorrow is my birthday. Be 84 tomorrow. So, anyway. If you had a number that was low enough, let's say they needed 20,000 in that particular year, anybody who had a draft number on the first 50 ping pong balls that came out, you were drafted. Well, the thing was, my number was pretty low, so I knew that I was either going to volunteer for the military or get drafted. If you get drafted, there's about a 98% chance possibility that you're going into the Army. That's Vietnam. It's just ramping up, and the stories were not good. Now you got to remember that from what I ended up doing. So I did not go into the Army. I went into the Navy. When I went to the recruiter, he said, you've got a college degree, psychology. We should make you an officer. We'll send you for 4 months up to Newport, Rhode Island to learn to be an officer, try and get some leadership. Questionable. Psychology degree, you know. So I really knocked it. We may have some psychologists in here, and I apologize for that. But anyway, so I went to OCS. 4 months. I got out in the middle of December 1964. And the story is, when you're at OCS, each class has 500 people in it. Back then, 99% were men. Now, it's like 70-30. But back then, it was mostly men. We're all in a big gymnasium. Everybody's sitting in a chair. It's the first time we've sat down and relaxed for 2 months since we were in OCS. It was classes 6 days a week. Each branch of the Navy, this is for not all the branches, just the Navy officers. And they start out with the big show. The Navy wants a lot of shipboard drivers. That's what they're shopping for. They want to try and convince most of the people in that gym, you need to be a shipboard driver. You need to be a communications officer. You need to be a bridge officer. I ended up with 30 years in the Navy, 5 years on active, 25 on the reserve, 30 years in the Navy. I had about 30 days aboard ship. So my career was a little bit different than the standard naval career path for most everyone. So I'm in that big gymnasium, and about every 15 minutes, a different Navy person from a different branch of the Navy, supply officer, medical, pilots, submariners. And the deal was, when you went into the gym, they gave you a 3x5 card. Put your name on it, and during the day, you listed your first 3 options of what you would like to do. If your grades were high enough, you would get your first choice. Until, let's say, that particular branch of the Navy need 5 of those officers. If you were the 6th person, you didn't get your first choice, you got your second choice, or third, or leftovers. Okay? So, my first choice in sitting there for that day, it looked like the most interesting. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my career in the Navy. Frogman. I was a good swimmer in high school and college. I taught water sports at a boys' camp for 2 summers in high school. I taught kids to swim who were older than I was. Swimming, the different strokes, diving, sailing, and I learned that from the National Aquatic School, which is a Red Cross school. The camp counselors sent me over that. All the camp counselors were mostly college professors, and here I am, 16, 17 years old, and I went to the waterfront school, ran the waterfront, and had an interest. So frogmen looked interesting. Second choice was a pilot. Third choice was submarines. So UDT, submarines, pilot. I got my first choice. But when you do that, that's Saturday, you're in this gym. Sunday morning, any of the branches of the service that had to have special requirements, like pilots, have to have very good eyesight, good hearing, etc. If you went into EOD, which is Explosive Ordnance Demolition, it's a Navy type, they're the ones that dismantle the bombs. Well, if you can't tell red from green and they say cut the green wire, so if you're colorblind, you don't go that direction. Pilots have standards on eyesight, etc. So my first choice, the next morning, Sunday morning, I had to be out on the football field at OCS, and they put us through a 1.5-hour training regimen. How physically fit are you? And I will go into that later when we start talking about SEAL selection. And that's what most of my talk will be. But I wanted to let you know how I got started in my naval career. It was, oh, that looks pretty good, and that one looks pretty good. So, I will say I was and I am still a good athlete. I'm 84 tomorrow. I play baseball, softball twice a week. I practiced this morning right on the other side of the fairgrounds here. And I'm a pitcher, slow pitch. But right now I'm on 2 teams. One team is undefeated and the other team we won't talk about. But I usually bat 3rd or 4th in the lineup. For anybody who follows baseball, that's your reliable hitter. So I enjoy it, still play a lot, and we go from there. When we're done, or if you want to get up and move around, if you get tired of sitting and listening to me for a while, my active duty career from 1965 to 1970 roughly, some pictures over here. You need to get out and go over and look at it. Okay. So I'm going to go through just briefly what I did for those 5 years when I was on active duty. I got out then and went on as I was getting more senior in the Navy and went through 8 commands, which means I was the commanding officer of 8 different units as a reserve officer. I was too junior when I was on active duty, but when I got in the reserves, so I had 8 commands. Most senior naval officers hope that they have 2 or 3 commands. I had 8. So I was doing the right thing, or had somebody snowed anyway. Okay. I graduated from OCS about December 18th or 19th, 1964. I got my orders to go to Frogman School, which ultimately is also SEAL team training. It's called BUZZ, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training, BUZZ. At that time, there were 2 schools for this, one in Coronado, California, right in the middle of San Diego. The other one's in Little Creek, Virginia. And each one ran a class, probably 5 or 6 classes a year. This is Vietnam. They're ramping up, so they need as many officers in every branch of the Navy as they could get. So, here I am, January 1, I fly from Pittsburgh, where my family is, to San Diego. Why San Diego and why not Little Creek, Virginia? What month is this? December? Anybody know what Virginia is like in January, February? You got to be a little bit smarter than the other guys, so I volunteered for San Diego and got that. That sounded a whole lot better than Virginia Beach. So, January 2nd, I started my training. That's a 6-month training program. It is as mental as it is physical. It is as psychological as it is physical. And if you have your best thoughts of how difficult they can put the physical training on you, triple that, and that's about what UDT SEAL training is all about, and we'll go into that a little bit later. I said, this is my active duty career. 6 months going through training. I got out of training, and my training class, starting January 2nd, started with 175, plus or minus a couple. It was 170, 175 officers and enlisted in San Diego. 6 months later, we graduated 29 out of 175. Most of them dropped in the first 6 weeks, and we'll go through that. So I get out of training. I go to Underwater Demolition Team 11 in San Diego right there. And within 2 months, we're trained up and we go to the Philippines where we're based so that we can be further assigned to go in and reconnoiter beaches in Vietnam. We would go from Vietnam on small ships called APDs, which is a personnel carrier for Army, Marines, Navy. We leave the Philippines. It was about a 4-day trip over to Vietnam. They would be out in the offshore 2-3 miles, take a rubber boat or whatever, go into the beach, recon the beach, and in some of our recons, we would have a Marine escort on the beach with weapons so that we could do our job and they would keep any of the bad guys away from us. Sometimes we didn't have that, and we would just have to be ready to bail out if we saw anybody and just swim out to sea. We're taught from day one, when you're in training, you get in trouble, get in the water, that's home, and you know how big a head looks like, half a mile out or a mile out? Can't even see it. So we're at home in the water. That's the whole purpose of it. Okay, so OCS, go into training, come out of training, go into UDT. Mostly reconning beaches. We got run off the beach a couple of times. Immediately following that, that was a 6 months tour over in and out of Vietnam. Come back to San Diego with UDT 11. Immediately assigned a week later to go for the Gemini and Apollo recovery team. You'll see one picture over here of a Gemini space capsule. The 2 capsules that I recovered in my 6 months tour on the Gemini and Apollo recovery were both unmanned, so there was not much publicity. So our job was, when the space capsule would come down, hit the ocean off of Hawaii, we had a 3-man team, would put a yellow balloon collar around the capsule, pull the button, it would be CO2 and fill it all up, and then it would stabilize. Because if you're in that capsule, it's bobbing around in the ocean, it's going crazy, and you get sick in about 30 seconds unless you're stabilized. So that was our job. Then the ship would come alongside aircraft carrier, 1,000 feet long, 950 feet long, to go over and pick up a capsule, which would fit between these 4 posts. That's about how big it was, and it's about as high as the roof ceiling here. That's about how big it is. So they would come home, hook it up, pick it up, take it out of the water and go. So I did that for 6 months, traveled all over the world, because there's no guarantee that that capsule was going to come down exactly where it was supposed to. These were training flights. They had no idea. They had a good idea where it was supposed to come down, but would it and did it? The 2 we had came down within an eye shot of the aircraft carrier. One real close and one was a couple miles away. So, anyway. So Gemini and Apollo was a 6-month program. When I finished that, I came back. Now I went into SEAL team. This is late 1965, in 66. I joined SEAL Team 1 in San Diego. Again, you have to volunteer to go in the Navy, and you have to volunteer to go into SEAL team. So it's double volunteering. No additional training, formal training, but when you join a platoon, you gear up for a deployment wherever you're going. If you're going to Alaska, Russia, Scandinavian countries, you get a lot of winter warfare training. We were going to Vietnam, and the position that we were going to be in over there was a mangrove swamp. Only place in the United States similar to a mangrove swamp is the Florida Everglades. Mangrove swamps are trees that grow a little bit higher than the roof here, but they have hundreds of roots that are above the water, and for half the day they are in salt water while it's high tide. When high tide goes out, turns into mud. So we're spending, in the 6 months when I was on my tour with SEAL team in Vietnam, we were about 100 miles south of Saigon, the capital, in a 6,000 square mile area, which was called the Rum Sap Special Zone. Mangrove swamp. That's almost 60 miles long, 100 miles wide. There was nothing in there, and the Vietnamese and the U.S. put flyers out, posters out, stay out. This is a free fire zone. Anything that we saw was either us or the bad guys. So it was literally a free fire zone. Much easier than the Army, the Marines, some of the Navy types who had to make a decision. They would go into a village. You have hooches, huts, buildings. They had the difficult task of, in split seconds, walking in a door and have to make a decision. Do I shoot the person on the other side? Is it a mother and a baby? Is it a male who is a priest? You don't know. So you have to go through the door and evaluate in a split second before you open fire or don't open fire. So we had it easy. Free fire zone, you see them, they're bad guys, and no questions asked. Okay. In the 6 months that I was in Vietnam with the SEAL team, we had one day off, Christmas Day. We operated 7 days a week, every week for 6 months. And we were relieved at the end of 6 months with another platoon that came over. There was 14 in a platoon, 2 officers, 14 enlisted. That's 2 fire teams or 1 platoon. I was just out of OCS. I was still a very junior officer, and I happened to be under a guy who I had all the respect for in the world. I learned that very quickly, and he ended up being a 3-star admiral. So when he matured and got up there, he ran the special operations for Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine for a couple of years. And he died of throat cancer, probably from the same thing where I have neuropathy and prostate cancer and everything, which is Agent Orange, if any of you have heard that. Well, when we were over there, probably 80% of the time for us to get from the riverbank where they would drop us off into the trees and jungle was about 100 yards, where they had defoliated everything, put poison on it, killed all the grass, all the trees, everything, because if you're going up and down the river, the bad guys would come right up to the bank and shoot and then disappear. So they cleaned everything out 100 yards. Well, then for us to get in, we had to walk through that Agent Orange. So we had a lot of exposure. I know we lost a lot of people, a lot of illnesses and diseases from it. That's still good again. Question?
Well, I was just saying, I'm an Agent Orange.
Yeah. One of those things. So, for the career I had, I still wouldn't change it, but I have neuropathy, which means I can't feel much from my knees and ankles, but I still play softball and run around and chase my grandkids, etc.
Yeah, who's your platoon officer?
Chuck Lemoyne.
Oh, okay.
Irving Chuck Charles Lemoyne. Yeah. Okay. After I got out of SEAL Team 1, which was almost 2 years into my 4-year tour, I extended to go in to become an instructor in the BUDS training program, and was an instructor in BUDS for 2 years. That's why I feel I don't really like to talk about operational things for the general public. Number one, right now, everybody in the military carries a camera, or when Osama bin Laden was taken down by SEALs, every man of those 21 people who went on that raid had a camera on their head. It was being telecast back to the White House or somewhere in Washington, and they were all watching every step from every person on camera. 1965, they didn't even want us carrying cameras. We were so brand new. SEAL team had just been formed in 1963. Here it is 65, so only a couple hundred SEALs had made it through the process and were deployed. So, anyway, my last 2 years on active duty were in San Diego as an instructor in BUDS. And now, for appreciation, now we're going to change gears. Any question on my career? You can see some pictures over here later. Yes?
Earlier you said you were in charge of a platoon to 8 something. Were you in charge of 8 groups at once or at separate times?
Rephrase that again.
Earlier you said you were in charge of 8, I forget what you said, you were an officer of 8 groups, right?
Okay. Our platoon when we went to Vietnam was 2 officers and 14 enlisted.
Okay.
That's 1 platoon, 2 fire teams. So I had a fire team, the other officer had the other fire team. Yeah.
You said you were in charge of 8 something, didn't you? Or am I mistaken? Separate. So were you doing them all at once or different times?
That was my whole 6-month tour in Vietnam. I had the same 7 people in my platoon.
Okay.
8 different reserves.
At the same time?
No, separate.
Oh, right. Right. Okay, got it. Sorry.
Okay. And you had a question, sir?
I was curious where you took your jump training.
Benny.
Of course you did.
Of course. That was the only jump school at that time, back in the 60s, Fort Benning, Army Jump School, you know. I went to Army Jump School, I went to Army Jungle Warfare School in Panama. I went to Army Winter Warfare School. So I have as many schools through the Army as I do, you know, Navy.
At the end of your training, did you go downtown and fight with the 82nd Airborne
No, no,
or the 101st?
no. If we're gonna get into what we did, and I'll make this clean for all the ladies and everything. When you're going through jump school, it's a 3-week school. First week, all classroom. Here's what we're gonna teach you how to jump out of airplanes. The second week is ground school, where you jump out of a tower that's 3 or 4 stories high. You do a lot of running and getting conditioning. We were in super good conditioning because this was after we had already gone through 6 months of SEAL training, go through Army Jump School, and those guys are just really out of boot camp and they get assigned to jump. So they can do 10 push-ups, we can do 200 push-ups. You know, and they can run for a couple hundred yards, we're running for 8 or 9 miles. So we're in good shape. And when we go to jump school, we get off the airplane, go to Fort Benning, and they assign us to barracks, and we're mixed with the Army types in there. And the whole story really is, when you go to Fort Benning, you are, how do I want to put this?
Just say it.
I don't know how to phrase here. It's not bad or anything. It's just, basically, we would work all day at the Army curriculum of what you're going to do. As soon as we finish chow in the evening, you're on your own. One of the guys in our group had a relative close by. We got a car and would drive the 45 minutes to an hour from Benning into Atlanta to the Playboy Club. We'd drink and carouse until 2 o'clock in the morning, drive back to the base because we had no restrictions, get about 2 hours of sleep, and we'd be up starting all over again. The Army guys were, you had nothing against them, but they were just brand new and weren't in good shape. And so we did that for 5 days while we were in jump school. You know, basically the third week is jump week. Every day you go out on the runway and there's 20 or 30 aircraft and 500 students, and you have to get X amount of jumps to qualify. So we would be sitting with our parachutes on along the edge of the runway. And about every 10 minutes, you get out and move about 100 yards and sit back down again and wait until that aircraft went around and came back down. Well, we're going to the Playboy Club all night, come back. So we are pretty well trained. If they put food in front of you, you eat it. You don't know what and when your next meal is going to be. When they say, sit down and get some rest, you sit down and go to sleep right then. And that's what everybody does. So while the Army types are really nervous about getting on the airplane, jumping off, we're sleeping along the runway. They gotta wake us up, move out, sit back down, go to sleep for another 10 minutes, get on the airplane, jump out. What's next? So that's it. Okay. So anyway, my last 2 years were as an instructor, and that's what we're going to get into now. SEAL team training called BUZZ. Let me see if I can work the buttons here. Okay, before and after. A little history on UDT and SEAL team. In the 1940s, Scouts and Raiders. Scouts and Raiders, you may hear some of the stories, but then underwater demolition teams were formed. There was a movie made with Richard Widmark in 1951 called Frogman. If anybody's a historian and wants to watch, look out Frogman with Richard Widmark, and it's a good depiction of underwater demolition teams. That was in the WW2 in Korea. Into Vietnam, the beginning. UDT did the recon of beaches all along Vietnam, some of the rivers and so forth. And then in 1963 and 64, under the leadership of John F. Kennedy, he wanted a special operations type of unit formed in the Navy. Army had it, Air Force had it, Marines had it. Navy didn't have what they would call special operations, sneak and peek. So they started and used the frogmen, UDT, to form up SEAL teams. They formed one SEAL team on the West Coast, SEAL Team 1, one on the East Coast, Little Creek Ravine, SEAL Team 2. And they began, after a couple of months of training, what are you going to train for? They had nobody before them. There was no history of SEALs. So they developed their own doctrine, and that's how SEAL teams started. The first manning of SEAL Team 1 and 2 was in 1963 into 1964. I joined UDT in 65 and joined SEAL Team 1 in 1960, late 65, early 66. So I was the first 3 years or so. I wasn't the, what they call in the Navy, the plank owner, the first people in a new unit are plank owners. I was not a plank owner, I was about 2 years behind them. But there probably were not more than 150 to 200 SEALs at the time that I joined the SEALs in 1966. So, okay. They were used, the SEALs were deployed in 3 areas of Vietnam, up near Da Nang for the northern portion of Vietnam, where I was in the Mung Sa Special Zone because an awful lot of the sappers, as they called them back then, would feel very comfortable in this mangrove swamps in dugout canoes moving around. They would go the 40 miles or so up into Saigon, blow something up, shoot something or do whatever, and then get into canoes at night and go right back into this mangrove swamp. Army is too big to maneuver into that kind of a thing. They could bomb it all day and would have no idea where they were. Marines, again, too big a unit to maneuver around all of the small rivers, the mud, and etc. When the SEALs were assigned in Vietnam, General Westmoreland said, I don't know how to use you. You're brand new. What can you do? Well, we're just learning what we can do. Where do you need us? He said, there's a 6,000 square mile piece of mud flats down there, and the bad guys keep running in there and hiding. Go in and just cause some hate and discontent down there and shoot as many of them as you can, because there's no restrictions. So that's what we did. The third group was down in the delta further south, and as I say, they had a much more difficult time than we did. We had to maneuver around in the mud, but they had to maneuver around from building to building, to race paddy to race paddy, while getting shot at, so they had a much more difficult time. Okay, so, let's see what's the next slide. This is Scouts and Raiders 42 to 47. During Korea, that's a big railroad bridge that the UDT snuck in, loaded up with demolitions, and blew up.
Was that one of the APDs? The ship?
APD.
Yeah, that was the APD there.
That was an APD, yeah. Okay. This is an example in 1962 how big a SEAL team was, and they're not too much different right now. In Coronado, the deployment is anywhere in the world, and they're still anywhere in the world. And it's roughly 120 SEALs, 40 or so officers, and a lot of support personnel. If anything, this number's gotten larger. This one hasn't. Roughly, SEAL Team 1 still has 120 to 130 enlisted, 20 to 30 officers, but they probably have 250 support personnel. Now, what does support personnel mean? Extra corpsmen. We got a corpsman over here from the Navy. Probably some of the most consistently decorated people in combat are corpsmen, because if SEAL team goes in, somebody gets hit, somebody's hurt, the corpsmen are the ones that go in under fire, get them, bring them out. So everybody has the highest regard for the corpsman. Okay. I had 4 rows. I had a corpsman that went with us. When we came back, and a couple of years later, he had probably stuff down to about here. He had ribbons and actions and everything. Silver stars, bronze stars. I have a Legion of Merit and a Bronze Star. That's my 2 big ones there. Okay. And again, 6 platoons, and this varies. This might go up to 8 or 10 platoons in a SEAL Team 1. Today, on the West Coast, down in San Diego, there is SEAL Team 1, 3, 5, and 7, 4 of them. On the East Coast, Little Creek, Virginia, SEAL Team 2, 4, 8, and 10. What happened to 6? 6 is a SEAL team made up of all of the hand-picked SEALs from the other 8 units to go in and do the extra super sensitive secret stuff that the President of the United States or the Joint Chiefs pull out as very highly classified, and it's not a routine mission such as the Osama bin Laden raid. Those are the ones that are pulled out and selected, and they take the highest of all of them and use those for SEAL Team 6. Okay. I'm going to keep going. That's Vietnam. Okay. What I would like to do is to tell you a little bit about what these young men, and by young, if you're 28, you're too old and you are not selected for SEAL training. You're too old, you're more likely to injure yourself, pull a muscle, etc. So these are 18 to 27-year-olds.
Is it also they're kind of like too smart to put up with that at that point?
You get a little more maturity, you're saying, why am I going through this? So there's got to be some of that, yeah. To go through all of this, you're going to hear about maturity, selection, etc. It has got something to do with it.
So what's the deal with the leadership cadre? Are they terminated at a certain age?
Once you're a SEAL for life. I mean, that's like for the ladies in here, once you're a mom, you're a mom for life, you know, and no matter what.
Age is not a factor if you're in the command structure.
No. You have to have been deployed and work your way up the chain of command. Yes. Okay. Here's the thing. John Doe or Sally Smith, because there is no distinction. A lot of the military branches say, oh, we don't want women, or the women can't do this, or whatever. The SEALs have taken a completely different tack on that and say, we are not changing our standards. The current SEALs don't want to have anybody going through training that can't make the standards. If anybody wants to try and qualify, and you can pass the standards, and we're going to go through this in a minute, you can begin training. Then you got 6 months of training to go. Okay, I want you to listen to this. When you were 21, 22 years old, 18 years old, how many push-ups could you do in 2 minutes? Okay. Minimum standard is 80. Minimum standard is 80 in 2 minutes. But they are going to take the ones with the best numbers. So what the instructors tell you when they're giving you this pre-test is, if you don't do 100 push-ups in your 2 minutes, there's going to be enough people get more than 80 that you aren't going to be selected anyway. So here's the deal. You start with push-ups. You're paired up, 2. You and I are together. I do my push-ups, you count. When I'm done, you do your push-ups, and you put your fist right under the person's chest. And when he goes up and down, he has to touch that chest, or else it doesn't count. You just skip that count. Okay. As soon as you're both done, you stand up. There's usually a SEAL team person there with a clipboard with everybody's name. Let's say there's 40 people trying out. You write that number down. 2-minute rest. 2 minutes for each one to do the push-ups, 2-minute rest. Then you do sit-ups. How many sit-ups in 2 minutes? Again, 80 is minimum, but you better be 100 plus to do it in your 2 minutes. Okay, both do the sit-ups. You hold my ankles, you count, I do mine, then you do yours, 2-minute break. Now, the separation between the men and the women, which is unfortunate, or it is a fact, upper bodies for the women are more difficult, and you don't have the upper body that the men have. You get to the pull-ups. There's no time limit on this, but you have to do 18 or more pull-ups. Most high school football players can't do 10. Most wrestlers can't do 10. Most swimmers can't do 10. To do 18, and as soon as you stop your pull-ups, these are the pull-ups. You're counting 18 minutes. So anyway, okay.
So 18 is the number?
Minimum. You don't make it 18
minutes?
No, unlimited. You want to hang there for 10 minutes, try it again. Once you stop and you're hanging, you're never going to get started again. So we go from there. Okay, we've done push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups. Now, you go in the pool and you do a swim. I don't have that up there. The swim is a couple of 100-meter swim in a certain time period, or you don't pass. You get out of the pool, rest for 2 minutes, put your running shoes on, and you go for a run. 1.5 mile run under 10 minutes. Now, that is probably the easiest of all, because that's the easiest one you can get prepped for. Push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups to do 100 or more in 2 minutes is really difficult. Everybody, if you just get out and run every other day for a couple of months, it's not easy, but it's not terribly difficult. Do those 5 things. Sit-ups, push-ups, pull-ups, swim, run. You pass all of those, and then those people, and this is being done about once a month in 25 or 30 cities all over the country, to get enough people so that every 6 weeks they start a new class in San Diego with 150 enlisted and 25 officers. So 170, 175 people. At the end of their 6 months training, that 175, they hope to get 25 to 30 to graduate. So they're all young. What happens if you drop out? You're in the Navy, you got your 4-year commitment, you're going to the fleet. You're going aboard ship or doing something else for the Navy. So that's the basic. And I want, if you don't do anything else, appreciate how much these 18 to 23 or 40-year-olds go through to volunteer to go in the SEAL team. Okay, there's 3 phases of training. It's roughly 6 months long. There's first, and this varies. Sometimes they'll change it. This will be 6 weeks long, and then Hell Week, and then 8 weeks, and then 9 weeks, whatever. It varies about a week or so. But the first 5 or 6 weeks are every day. You start with chow in the morning, 6 a.m. You go for an hour and a half of PT. You're in a big circle, and there's an instructor in the middle, and he goes through this kind of stretching exercise, and then that kind of exercise, and this, and then pull-ups, and do this for an hour and a half. Okay, when you're done with go on a 3 or 4 mile run. The first run, when you are in training, is 4 miles. First run, 4 miles. And you keep up with the instructor who's leading the run. Then you go to noon chow. And I bring this up because later on, food comes into this big time. In Coronado and in Little Creek, the chow hall is one of the favorite places to be because the instructors don't go into the chow hall. So when the trainees get to the chow hall, if you're outside the line, you can get picked on and they'll tell you, go do some pull-ups on bars there, or go do push-ups, or do this or that. Once you get into the chow hall, you can relax, have your lunch, eat as much as you want, but there is an instructor in front of the trash line. If you take more food than you eat, no, you go back over and you eat that until you're done. Next time, don't take so much. If you take it, you eat it. Okay. 5 weeks of conditioning, that's running, swimming, etc. Running is running, except that half the runs are in hard packed sand down near the water where it's fairly hard, and it's not like concrete, but it's fairly hard. The top part of the run is when they go up into the soft sand and you're in boots and swim trunks and you're slogging through that soft sand. That's more difficult. Swimming. They break you down on your swimming because most everybody's thinking overhand strokes or butterfly, etc. In the Navy, when you're in either a frogman or now SEAL team, you are swimming with one hand tied behind your back. The reason for that is when you're operational, you're always carrying a weapon, you're carrying a radio, you're carrying something, so you got one arm and 2 legs to propel you through the water. The other one, so they just train you right away. You're doing a side stroke or a modified side stroke to get where you need to go. In training, before you get to the 5th week, you've worked up on your runs from 4 miles the first day up to a 15-mile run the week before Hell Week. Okay? And it's not difficult because most of that one is in hard pack and it's fairly good. Swim, 8-mile swim. So the longest swim you're going to have in training is just before Hell Week. Okay. Now, Hell Week. This is what separates out a lot of people. In this first 5 weeks just conditioning, I had a young man from one of the high schools right in our neighborhood right here who talked to me about a year ago. He wanted to go into SEAL training. I got him an interview and I drove him down to San Diego to SEAL training compound, introduced him, and the Master Chief, E9, the highest training instructor down there on the enlisted side, took an hour and a half of his time to take us on a tour, show us all of the facilities. He came back, went to boot camp for the Navy, went into the program, got orders, because he was in pretty good shape, went into the training program, 3rd day of training, hurt his back, and he was out. 3rd day. So, anyway. Okay. 5th or sometimes 6th week, you get into Hell Week. And you probably had your class drop from 175 in phase 1. By the time you get into Hell Week, the 5th week, you're probably down well under 100. You're probably 80, 75, something like that. Because no one really realizes when you're operating and running and swimming and doing this and that every day from 6 a.m. until dinner, sometimes an evening job, but not very often. They'll put you out and do a night swim or a night run just to shake it up a little bit. You get into Hell Week. Listen, Hell Week starts Sunday evening, 10 p.m. in the training compound. And basically, they start out by having you in a regular standing up formation, and they turn the hoses on you, get you good and wet. Cold, 10 o'clock at night, cold, even if it's in midsummer, if it's July starting class, but anyway, spray it down, get you wet. There's two things that drive most of the trainees out of the program. One is cold water, being wet, cold, and miserable. That's one thing. The other thing is sleep deprivation. If you don't get enough sleep, you basically, your mind goes 10 different degrees. So, you start at 10 o'clock Sunday night. You get no sleep Sunday night, no sleep Monday night, no sleep Tuesday night, and you're into Wednesday before sometimes the instructors, depending on the looking and the strength, and they've been putting students through all the time. If it's a strong class, you may not even get any sleep Thursday night. And you're running on purely just adrenaline and a remote, and when the instructors say, run from here down the beach for a mile and come back, you're running as fast as you can, but it's like in slow motion. You're just barely moving. They don't put anybody in the ocean or in the bay. It's only in the pool where they can watch you 100% of the time because people fall asleep. If you're in formation and walking down the beach or running down the beach, every once in a while you just see somebody just kind of peel off, fall asleep, and don't know where they're going. Somebody says, go get him, and you bring him back and wake him up and start over again. So it is very difficult. Sleep deprivation will drive, again, a lot more people out with the cold, the wet, and the sleep deprivation. In training, usually it's Thursday night. The instructors, vicious guys that they are, you bring the students back from an afternoon run or an activity, and you tell them they've had chow, so their bellies are full. You tell them to go take a shower, put on a clean uniform, greens, get dressed. They say, get your blanket and your pillow off your rack and meet us at the football field. They go out there, everybody leaves the blanket down, puts a pillow on it, they take a walk around a little bit, turn on some nice soft music, and they say, okay, everybody lay down. Don't go to sleep. And you've been up since Sunday night. Well, you get all kinds of arguments when they're snoring out loud. People from 30 feet away can hear them snoring, and the instructors get them to hit the bay and get wet. Well, it does not take more than 10 or 15 minutes before that whole class has fallen asleep there. I mean, it just is going to happen. So everybody's already in the bay. The first one to fall asleep is in the bay the longest, but they're all 3, 4 at a time. They're going out to the bay until the last holdout, who's doing something, biting his cheek or doing something to stay awake. But when he finally falls asleep, you get everybody all wet, you get them out, and you go on with some other evolution. By the end of Hell Week, you're down from 175 to probably 45 or 50 in the class now. And all the training then changes dramatically because you go from physical 24/7 to all of a sudden the most dangerous phase of training, and when you are a SEAL, is diving. Parachuting is simply a safe deal. Demolitions are a safe deal. Diving, you have no accidents. You either get out of the water and you're healthy or you're dead, because diving is very dangerous. So they spend a lot of time teaching you how to dive. Brett, how are we doing with time?
We are doing perfect. It's almost 3 o'clock.
Okay. Here's one of the things when we're talking about swimming and diving. It's called ground proofing. This they do about the first or second week when you're in the diving phase. Tie your ankles together, tie your hands behind your back, drop you into just 4 or 5 at a time in the deep end of the pool, and you have to swim 3 laps of the pool. with your hands and feet tied. Now, everybody has been learning how to dive, they've had rigs on everything, but the instructors need to find out who can relax and keep yourself under control when you have some negative factors on you. Now, there's two kinds of bodies, those that float automatically and those that don't. 80% of muscular men sink. Okay, now, there's two kinds of swimmers you're looking at here. This is something that's not me, but it looks like something like me. I mean, I sink like a rock. Okay, so how do you get 3 lengths in the pool? You basically go to the bottom, push off 2 or 3 feet ahead of you, go up to the surface, get a breath of air, come down, bottom, exhale, push off, go up to the surface, so you're going like 3 feet at a time, but you'll make it sooner or later. There's no time period on that. The other ones are like this guy right here. He's probably a floater. This guy's a floater. He just does the kick, and he's down in 10 minutes. This guy is about 45 minutes to an hour. But, and there will always be 2, 3, 4 people in every class. They get a mouthful of water or a snoot full of water, and they panic, and they touch the side of the pool, and you're out of training. You have to stay under control, body control. So that's one of those things where it's just a test. When you get finished with drown proofing, you know you are comfortable in the water. Everybody in training for the whole 6 months is in a boat crew. Boat crew is 7 people, usually 1 officer and 6 rowing people. At least once a week, you go out and go through the surf, paddle out, dump the boat over, dump it back again, get in, and come back in. That's okay when it's 3, 4 feet of surf. But when it gets up in some of the winter months, 8, 9 feet of surf, you can be out there for 3 hours, and let's say there are 5 or 6 boat crews in that class. None of them even get out through the surf, let alone out and back. But it's an exercise the instructors put everybody through. You got to try it so you get used to it. Anyone ever been down to the Hotel del Coronado? Okay. Beautiful hotel, right in the middle of the beach, and it's about 2 miles from the SEAL team training Bud's area. Right out on the beach side of the Hotel del Coronado, it's a rocky outlet. And at least once, sometimes twice, in Hell Week and after Hell Week, you bring your rubber boats in one at a time across those rocks. These boats weigh 325 to 350 pounds. 7 people manhandling them up over the rocks while the waves are hitting you, etc. But this is your lifeline. If you're in combat and you're going in, most likely you're going in by rubber boat. So you have to get used to working as a team with that rubber boat. You go in, do it, carry it over the rocks. The instructors will debrief you, send you up the beach 100 yards. You go back out and get in line to do it again. You do that for a good 4 hours. You might come across the rocks 3, 4, 5 times, depending on how. If it's bigger waves, there's usually somebody gets scraped out a little bit. You know, and sometimes it's worse than that, but I would say for the most part, you just get scraped up. The other thing is, by the time you've gone through, and I can attest to this, in Hell Week, I told you, you're operating almost 24/7, and one of the biggest things that the instructors do is to get you in the whole class. You may have 40, 45 people in the class. You start single file and go in the loop, and the first person gets tighter and tighter in the loop until you're all in a small little bundle. Take a knee, you get down on your knee. Now you make a Roman candle. You start throwing sand up in the air. You get sand everywhere. Nose, eyes, ears, crotch, armpits, everywhere. And then you've got to walk to chow. During Hell Week, almost everybody ends up with raw calves, crotch area, shoes can be bad. The corpsmen on active duty, not the ones the corpsmen might be going through training because they go through training. These are the ones who are already SEALs or they're admin corpsmen for the training unit. Basically, you strip down to your swim trunks and every day, every morning, the corpsmen check you out. Raise your arms, spread your legs, they check out to see how bad you're rubbed, raw, or whatever, because some of these young men will do anything to avoid getting dropped. They will put up with all kinds of things. And if someone has made it that far and they don't want to drop, sometimes the instructors are forced to roll them back in the class. So they go from this class, 6 weeks later, they start over again, if you want to start over. Okay. Diving. You start in the pool. Diving, as I say, is a dangerous evolution within training. It's about 9 weeks, and they start with basics. 99% of the people who go into SEAL training have never had scuba tanks on. They may have swum in a pool, but they've never had a scuba tank. So you have to get used to breathing. Everybody, not everyone, most everyone will breathe through their nose. You have to learn to breathe through your mouth and exhale through your mouth. That's difficult for some people. It really is. So you start in the pool. They put the rig on you. You go into the pool and just sit on the bottom and get used to breathing. That's a 2-hour evolution. Just go down there and sit until your bottle's empty. And you know then what it is when all of a sudden there's no air. So you go up to the top. Okay. You go from the pool and just sitting down there to the pool, swimming around with your swim fins on. Swim fins brings up a story. I went through training in 1965. The class before me had an Olympic swimmer. His name was Mike Troy. Went through the Rome Olympics in 1960. 3 gold medals as a swimmer. The first week of dive training, when they're training you, they put fins on you, and these are big suckers. These are big fins. When he was in there and we're just swimming in bare feet and swimming, he's out of the water 10 minutes before the second person even gets there. Put swim fins on him, different muscle group, etc. He almost drowned. The instructors had to go in and pull him out because his legs cramped up, his calves and thighs cramped up on him, and they had to pull him out. Well, within a couple of days, he got used to it, built the muscles up, and again he took off. But they're an Olympic swimmer, and you change some of the parameters, and you got to start over. You got to be flexible and stay up with it. This I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in, but what happens if your mission is to swim into an enemy harbor where there's people all over? If you've ever seen people with scuba tanks on, they exhale, and you can see the bubbles going to the surface. Well, if you're sitting on the pier and you see these bubbles coming up to the surface, you know there's somebody down there. Drop a hand grenade over and it cleans up that problem. So, what has the Navy perfected since way back in the 40s and 1950s are a rebreathe, closed circuit. So when you exhale in your backpack, instead of exhaling out into the ocean, you exhale into your backpack, and one side of your backpack is oxygen and breathing in. The other one is a CO2 absorbent, so when you exhale, it goes through that, all your CO2 is absorbed in that, and there's no bubbles. So you can actually swim in undetected. That's what a closed circuit is. There's several of those rigs. They're very sophisticated, very dangerous, and for the most part, the ones that the SEALs use, you don't go deeper than 30 feet.
On that system, are you recirculating the air, or it's just you have a limited capacity based on O2
You know,
tank?
a little bit of both. Basically, when you breathe in, breathe out, you don't breathe 100% of the oxygen out of the normal air. You'll use some of it. So basically, you've got a crank on your hip, and when your CO2 builds up, you take another shot out of the pure oxygen bottle. You can't breathe pure oxygen. You got to mix it with some of the other natural gases. So you refill those up so you're using it. These will go much longer with mixed gas. Yeah. Submarines. Navy SEALs, the old UDT used to use submarines a lot. I mean, it's the stealthiest way in the world to get around undetected. Right now, the U.S. has the best submarines in the world, although there are other submarines. China has some, Russia has some, there are some other ones. They are, if they go deep enough, they're undetectable. You can go down here, and 3 months later, you can come up over there somewhere, and they don't know where you are. So we are, as SEALs, trained to lock out of a submerged submarine, 60 feet down. Okay, you come out through the hatch, go to the surface. That's the easy part, going up. When you do your mission, you come out, you're already tired. Now you have to free dive down 60 feet to go into that little hole to go down and lock back into the submarine. That's a challenge. And again, even though now we're halfway through training, there'll be a couple of people that won't be able to do that evolution. Okay, third phase. Third phase is land warfare, demolitions, weapons, and infiltration. This is San Clemente Island. How many of you go to the beach and you see Catalina right off the coast here? That's 25 miles. Another 25 miles further out, on a clear day like this morning, you can see a real low island out there, and that's San Clemente. It's a military island used only for pilots. There's a very nice runway out there. None of the commercial people can use it unless it's an emergency. And the Navy pilots use that for touch and goes. When they have to land and take off, I don't know what, anybody a Navy pilot in here? Navy pilot, I don't know what the number is, but you have to make a certain number of landings and takeoffs every month to stay qualified. So, when all of the runways at Miramar, at any of the other naval bases where they have them, if they're busy, basically they can go out here and do touch and goes all day, and there won't be more than 2 or 3 other people to look at it. So, if you look at this island's about 20 some miles long. At the widest spot, it's a little over a mile wide. But right down in this little bit, you see a white spot, that's a beach, and there's a couple of buildings. That's a SEAL team compound for training. It's a chow hall, a couple of berthing buildings where you can get some racks, and there's an isolated demolition bunker where they can store all the demolitions that you want to fire. You leave San Diego, you put all your weapons and all your demolition into that bunker, and then over the next 3, 4, 5 days, you can have fun with all the demolitions and weapons that you want to. It's a good training site. When you're in training, they take the trainings out there, and every day you have classroom. In a classroom, there's one classroom out there. They teach you what your demolitions are supposed to be for that night. Then at night, you get in your rubber boats with demolitions on your back. You go from Northwest Harbor, which is what that is. You paddle out around and come in here, or you come out here and come around and land at night through the surf. Sometimes the surf is 2, 3 feet and you can walk out of it. Other times 8 or 10 feet, and you hope to be able to walk when you get to the beach. So you go in, land, and when you're landing, now you turn into a patrol. You patrol to whatever your site is. You got to find that. There's a lot of cactus out there. You gotta work your way around Cactus, find your target, which is usually some wooden pallets stacked up. You take the demolitions off your back, you wire it up, you back off or head back to the beach where you've left your rubber boats, and your timed fuse will blow up those wooden pallets, and you come back. Now, your briefing may have started at 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock at night. You do the evolution. Everything seems to be going good from the student's standpoint. You get back into the area at 1 o'clock and 1 a.m. and the instructors say, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right, you did this, we saw you do that, etc. Take your watches out. It's 3 a.m. right now? No. It's 9 p.m. just like it was when we briefed before. Next officer's up, he briefs in 1 hour, makes all the assignments for everybody in the class, and you start over again. And the answer is, you better have that next target blown up before daylight. So you start over again. So that's one of those things. So the instructors, it may have gone perfect, but the instructors say, no, we're going to keep you up all night tonight. Okay. One of the most dangerous things, and where more military personnel, now that we've got some Army types in here, thank you for showing up. Most dangerous thing is not necessarily being in a firefight because you know where the enemy is and you know what they have or you figure they do and you're in cover. Most dangerous thing for SEAL or anyone else, Army, Marines, or whatever, is going through a door. You've been given intel in that farmhouse or that hooch over there, there's a possibility of bad guys. Don't know how many, but you got to clean them out. So, SEALs practice this out at San Clemente for hours and days and weeks of getting 4 and 5 people in a door in a split second. You evaluate everything that's in the room, shoot the bad guys, you don't shoot the good guys, and you hope that none of your people are injured. But that takes a lot of training, so you're not shooting the guy ahead of you. And you evaluate your particular, you go into a room, and I go in and I go left. I've got this 45-degree angle. The guy behind me comes in and he's got this 45. The third one got this one, and the fourth one here. And that's in about a second and a half. You go in the door and you're evaluating everything. Obviously, if there's any firing going on in there, then you are at liberty to open up on whoever that is. But that doesn't mean there's not one weapon in there and there's 8 pregnant women, 2 nuns, and a priest. So you got to pick out the one bad guy that has the weapon. And you got to do that in a split second. You shoot the wrong person and you're in trouble. So it is the most dangerous thing that SEALs do is going through a door when you don't have good enough intel to know exactly what's on the other side of that door. Right? Okay. And I think we're getting close. We're towards the end of this thing here, and I'm going to open it to question and answer, start thinking about it. These are some of the weapons that we use. Pistol, assault rifle, machine gun, and the Big Daddy, the sniper. Now, I was a pretty good shot with a pistol and a carbine and a rifle. When I was just about ready to retire after 30 years, I was in Tampa Bay, which is the head of the whole special operations for all of the branches. And after a 4-day conference, Friday afternoon before we were all shipped back home, they said, you can go deep sea fishing, you can play golf, you can fire a sniper rifle, you can do this, that, about 8 or 9 different things. And I had never fired a sniper rifle. They took 5 of us, and just 5 of us, and selected. Most of them went fishing or went golfing. Not what happened. They put us on a 1.5 mile range, mile and a half, 55-gallon oil drum. Okay? A mile and a half, and the most requirement that you have is you have a scope. All assault sniper rifles have a good scope, but you've got to have a guy beside you who is a trained spotter. He said the wind's coming from the left and the right, so you need to adjust this amount. With the heat, your projectile is going to drop 6 feet. So your sniper assistant will say, aim 6 feet right and 6 feet up. You do that, you adjust, you pull the trigger. I hit 8 out of 10 from a mile and a half. I hadn't shot a weapon for 30 years, let alone a sniper rifle. So, anyway, I think that's about where we are. Are we okay on time?
Good questions.
Yeah, we're going to open up for question and answers. So I would be very welcome to take any questions and answers. Walking up here and look at some of these pictures, and we'll go from there. Yes, sir.
In Vietnam, what weapon did you carry?
One of these, it depends. It depends on where you are. M16, M14, carbine. We were in mangrove swamps. Those have roots and you're climbing in and over, under and around. So a long sniper rifle isn't going to do you any good. You want a short, compact, and as short as you can get. Even our point man had an automatic shotgun with a sawed-off barrel. His whole thing is, if he's walking down the trail and somebody sees coming the other way, he just lays on the trigger and has about 10 shots of buckshot going into that jungle while everybody else deploys and gets set up to avoid an ambush. So, if you're out in the middle of the desert, you can all carry, sniper rifles for that matter, because you strap it on your back and it doesn't matter when you lay down, you can do whatever you need.
When you were doing instructor stuff, how much time did you go out? Did you ever go out to Nyland?
Yes. Before I deployed for SEAL team, I went to Nyland, Chocolate Mountains.
Okay.
Yeah, we went out there. They have much better facilities now. When I went to Nyland in 1965, at night, after we were done operating for the day, we would come in behind a gas station, clean our weapons, get something to eat, and sleep on the concrete behind the gas station.
So there was no green trailers there at that time?
No.
Okay, because that was a little bit after that.
That's right, yeah.
And then I also heard you guys would shower in one of the canals.
Canal, yeah. It was clean water, it's going down, and you don't have to wash out because you hang on to a rope and just get out there in the middle of that canal and, it flushes everything off of you pretty well. You go in fully clothed because it's 90, 95 and you get in that water, it's nice and cool, not even cold.
The pad where that gas station is still there.
Is it really?
The empty lot, the dirt lot that was there where they put trailers before they went into the new area, that's still there too.
Oh.
Basically untouched.
I have been out to Nyland since 1965. So, yeah.
I was surprised when you said a platoon is only like 12, 14 people, because that's a squad in the other branches.
Correct. Well, again, Joint Chiefs of Staff make most of the assignments for big operations. And the way they assign their units for a particular mission usually is, what is the intel, number one? How many people is it going to take to do that? If it's 150, 200 or more, it's the Army. If it's 150 down to 75 or so, it's the Marines. That's what they like to work in. When you're down under 15 people and you have a surgical deal, it is Army Special Forces or SEALs. They go in because they're used to operating and will not operate with more than 10 or 15 people.
So is that a kind of a mathematical thing where a SEAL platoon, 12, 14 guys, is effectively in terms of training and firepower, the same as a squad in the Army?
Yes,
Okay.
can be, yes, right, because all of the SEALs have automatic weapons, all of them. And not all of the other services have an automatic weapon in everyone else's hand, maybe one or two for the squad, but not everyone.
It's an interesting mentality.
Is this the same kind of presentation that you gave to like high school students or?
No, little upgrade for, yeah, because most of the high school students can't even spell Vietnam.
Find it on a map?
All find it on the map. Yes, ma'am.
What did your parents do for a living?
My father was a doctor, my mother was a nurse. Yeah. General practitioner, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. North side. Anybody from Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania? Hello there. That's it. And usually when I'm just out in public and somebody comes up and says hello and says more than about 10 words, I say, "You're from Western Pennsylvania, aren't you?" A Pittsburgher can pick somebody in Pittsburgh pretty quickly. Yeah.
We have about 5 minutes left for questions, if you have any.
Yes, sir.
Do you remember how many bolts you could do?
What I did, I did more than a minute. I did over 100. I did 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 25 pull-ups.
Wow.
Did
Can
yeah.
you still do pull-ups?
Yeah, 25.
Nice.
My grandson can do 25 right now, and he's just going into high school.
That's cool.
But he had one of those pull-up bars that hangs on your bedroom door. He's been doing pull-ups since he was 4 or 5, so. But that's what separates the one thing that most of the women who are interested in maybe looking at SEAL as a possibility, that's the first thing that any instructor will tell any woman. When you can get to 20 to 25 pull-ups, good pull-ups, full hang, straight this way, not backhand, and you do that, you're probably ready to go. There have been 3 women since 1965 that I know of that made it through the pre-training, the test, got orders, but didn't make it 2 hours. They dropped out in the first couple of weeks.
Do you remember who your instructors were when you went through Bud?
A couple of them. The Indian, Vince Oliveira, he was our class proctor. Mother Moy, yes. And a couple of the officers were Lance Man, Gazelle, could run anywhere, anytime, and you had to tell him to stop. Oh, and I told you I had to, one of the deals was about meals. When you're going through Hell Week, you get no sleep, no nothing, and you have a boat crew of 7 people, and all of a sudden one of your boat crew says, "Can't take it anymore, I'm going to quit. I'm going to go ring the bell." You ring the bell 3 times and you're out. Well, there's fights that break out from the boat crew that won't let that guy get to the bell to ring it because they don't want him to leave. And usually the story is, it's 11 a.m. in the morning. We only have 1 more hour until what? Noon chow. Noon chow is a break. And when you're going through training, you eat at 6 a.m., you eat at noon, you eat at 6 p.m., and if there's a night evolution at midnight, you have what they call middays, which are soup and sandwiches and all that kind of thing. Everything always stops for that 1 hour or hour and a half. So if somebody's going to do it, they'll sit on that guy until it's time the instructor say, "Okay, knock off, we got to march to chow hall." And you got an hour and a half. And there's been some guys that have been saved by that. Most of them don't. Once they've got it in their mind they're going to quit, it's tough to talk them out of it.
Question, when you went out on patrol, what was the basic kit that you took?
As light as possible, and depending on how you were going. When I was in Vietnam, most of our ops were 24 to 48 hours. So you're carrying water, you're carrying food, you're carrying ammunition. One of the bigger guys in there, you'll see him on here beside me, he's a big 6'4" black gentleman, his name is Black Mac. He carried the radio. Today, radio that will go anywhere in the world is about big as an old pack of cigarettes. Ours were about 25 pounds, they would call it Prick 25, and they could, if you could see where you're going, that's as far as that would transmit on your radio. I mean, line of sight was about it. Now it's around the world, loaded. The other thing is, training now is not 6 months, 2 years. 2 years before you put on the sealed device. Technology, operational evolutions, GPS, how they work. There are spotters now. Every SEAL you see on TV now over Iran, you see these guided missile rockets and propellers hitting a target that's no bigger than a semi-pickup truck. Well, there's two ways you can do that. Either the pilot holds his laser on that spot, or there's somebody on the ground with a laser with that little red dot on the target from a couple hundred yards away, and the pilot drops that missile, and it follows where your red dot is and hits it. So, now right now, you're going to say, you know, is there any SEALs in? I don't think so. I don't think we, U.S., have anybody or very few people on the ground at all. Israelis, yes. Israelis are all over the place over there. That's where all of our intel is coming from. And we are setting up our missions to go in based on the intel that you get. And again, good intel is golden. Most intel is, you hope,
Not so good.
yeah. Okay.